Hi all. I'm in a village called Hunt End this afternoon, on the edge of Redditch. It's not where people usually imagine the start of Royal Enfield. Most people think of Royal Enfield, they think of Redditch itself and the bike works that a lot of us are probably aware of and know where it is. It's it's a popular place for ride outs if you're a Royal Enfield enthusiast. But for me, the beginnings of the company really was here at Hunt End. Strangely, in Enfield Road. This is Enfield Road, running down here behind me. 1815, a chap called George Townsend was born in Ulster, in Warwickshire. If you ever want to go and visit that village, it's spelled Ulcester, but the locals call it Ulster. And his father was a needle manufacturer. These are needles for sewing machines because the textile industry was massive in those days, and there were lots and lots of cottage industries forging needles, and it was a big business. Anyway, that's what his father did, and that's what George carried on with. And by 1851, young George had managed to get enough money together to buy a premises here in Hunt End. Now, it was down the far end of the road down there, but the original building isn't there anymore, unfortunately. But there's one here that was built at the same time that's exactly the same. And it's this 3-story building behind me. There we are. And that white cottage to the side as well, that's original too. So it would have looked identical to that, exactly the same, which is quite interesting. Now, in 1815, when he started with 16 blokes working for him and 2 boys. And I presume the 2 boys were probably his sons. That was George Townsend Jr., named after his dad, of course, and his stepbrother, Foster. And they were all here doing pretty well. And they were doing so well that 20 years later, 1871, they'd actually got 170 people working for them in the business. And they'd taken over the whole of that side of the road, all the way down there. There are some very early cottages that will be part of the original works where people actually made needles for them. Anyhow, so things go on apace. George is the main person that runs the business, George Jr. Foster comes along, but he's not a senior partner. He's just there helping out, really. And he gets a bit fed up, and Foster decides to leave George running the company. But before he goes, Foster accidentally or inadvertently alters the course of history for all of us Royal Enfield fans and for the company itself, because before he leaves, he takes into the building there an old bone shaker, a very early bicycle. They really were bone shakers. They got an iron frame, wooden wheels, cart wheels really, with steel iron bands for tyres. Very early bicycle. An absolute nightmare, I should imagine, to try and ride. And he left it there when Foster went. Anyway, George was taking a look at this one day and decided that he'd quite like to have a go at modernising this thing. Cycling was becoming all the rage. Lots of manufacturers were starting up, especially in the south side of Birmingham, down here and all throughout the cities. So he decides he's going to have a bash at this. And a little while later, while he's still trying to develop a cycle, he has a bit of luck. He runs into an old friend who lives in a village just up the road from here called Headless Cross, a chap called William Cook. Now, William worked for himself as well. He used to manufacture cycle parts from his little shed at the end of his garden. That's all he had. But he'd come up with the idea of how to create a saddle from a single piece of steel. So they'd stretch leather across a single piece of steel wire, thick wire, went round making the framework of the saddle and coming down to spirals at each end to create springs. And this was the first suspension for bikes, you see. And George said, that's a great idea. It's just what I need for my bikes. And that's what he did. He developed that idea and patented it. I hope he gave his friend William some money for that, because he did very well out of it. And he started creating his bikes with these saddles, and cycle components as well for other people that he'd sell to other manufacturers. He was doing really quite well. Trouble was, as often happens with these businesses, you know, he ran into financial difficulties a little bit further up the road, and they bought him financiers, which he didn't see eye to eye with rather. They got plans and he didn't like the sound of it. Eventually another two chaps got involved, a chap called Edie and a chap called Smith, and this is where the story of Royal Enfield takes a sharp right turn, really. And I'm going to tell you about that in another chapter of this story later on, because it's a bit too detailed to go into right now. I haven't got time. And these two guys, Edie and Smith, they deserve a film all of their own because they're quite characters. But this is where it started for me. Hunt End, in a building identical to that one right there. Anyhow, hope you found that interesting, as usual. And I'll talk to you soon. All the best. Bye bye.